Hi, I'm Jana Arbanis, and I lead the telecom, media, and entertainment industry sector for Deloitte. It's hard to imagine a topic that is getting more attention right now than the metaverse. By some accounts, the metaverse will have more of an impact on how we live, work, learn, and play than any other technological advance to date. And not only will that mean that we will be accelerating the adoption of what exists today, like buying digital assets in a gaming world or instantly purchasing a real good from your favorite creator on a social media platform, but it will create entirely new business models. And new business models mean new tax regulation in the future. But today, it creates a lot of uncertainty. So today, I'm here to talk to two of my tax partners, Barbara Bona and Tyler Spalding, about the implications on tax for the metaverse and the future. So let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about the tracking of digital assets.
It's important to identify what is that asset. Is it a service? Is it a license? Is it a right? Is it property? In tax, we sometimes talk about capital and ordinary, whether you can take a loss or not. And so it's important to understand exactly what it is that you're buying in the forefront.
Absolutely. And even more complexity will come from the fact that what you can buy in Metaverse will not only be digital assets, but could be also physical goods. One of the use cases that is being very widely discussed is when you can participate in a virtual event, but also have access to, for example, an NFT that allows you to buy a fashion item that at a discounted price. Knowing exactly who your seller is, who your buyer is, and what is being sold is going to be crucial and really adds to complexity.
And when you talk about the metaverse, you're talking about expanding that it could go into a whole entire array of different places. And that's crossing not only the digital walls that exist, but that might also encroach on the physical walls that also exist from a tax perspective.
One of the main tenets of the metaverse is around that portability element, the interoperability, and being able to take things, digital assets that I've purchased on one platform and take them to the next. I know that my son in particular is absolutely engaging in purchasing digital assets and actually might even want a complementary physical asset to go with that, maybe a pair of sneakers, maybe something else, myself, maybe a handbag. But how does that then complexity of having a digital asset and a physical asset then create even more things for companies to be thinking about?
Let's try to break down that example for my avatar, a virtual version of sneakers and then also physical one, right? So for starters, that touches upon buying the digital asset, touches upon what globally is understood as electronically supplied services taxation. This is already a recognized concept, and it usually follows the taxation goes after the buyer. You have to identify where is your buyer,
where physically are they, right?
Where exactly? What's the jurisdiction? Usually tracking either IP or billing address, and taxation of those services will, follow that lead. For the goods, it's completely different. Then you have to track the goods, where they are, where they're going to be shipped from and to, and that could bring even customs consequences. And whoever's selling in the metaverse is going to be responsible for taxes. That's a big question. Who's exactly going to be responsible has to have the ability to not only know these things, those parameters of taxation, know where the goods are coming from, and have the ability to pick up on taxes.
Right now, you might have a certain platform in which you can buy goods upon, and there might be different sellers on that platform. Those platforms are the ones being oftentimes regulated to monitor the compliance of the sellers on that platform. When you think about it in the metaverse, and you think about the fact that we're going to get away from one platform to several different platforms to maybe brands themselves directly engaging people in entertainment as well as also goods, that becomes a lot more challenging for governments to think about how they would tax those different situations.
There's a change coming into taxation of virtual events for VET internationally. It was acknowledged that it's no longer can just follow the place where the event takes place, but it's going to change. European Union's introducing changes, and it's going to go after where the buyer of whatever access to that event for virtual event is established, right? So you see already a change in that.
And when you think about digital service taxes and other taxes that have been created in these places, to the point of where the customers is, you have a bunch of different governments who have different priorities. If you have engineers in a place, they might want to tax where the engineers are. If you have customers, they might want to tax where the customers are. If they're putting the event on in a certain jurisdiction, they might want to tax there. So it's a whole lot of things to consider in a very emerging space.
There's really a spectrum, I would say, in terms of where companies are at with respect to the metaverse. In some cases, people are sort of waiting to see what happens. In some cases, companies are leveraging an ecosystem and partnering with a platform to create a storefront or some sort of a presence in the metaverse. And some people are, in essence, building a metaverse platform. What should companies who know that they will need a presence in the metaverse, what should they be thinking about today, given the uncertainty?
Well, maybe just one thing to say is, who's the company who doesn't need a presence in the metaverse, right? And when you think about all the different industries, from retail, technology, restaurants, goods, everybody's probably going to be in the metaverse at some point in time.
Right.
And so,
Professional services will be in metaverse as well. That's predicted, or lawyers.
so almost all industries will be going into the metaverse. And what I think you really need to start with is how you're going to commercialize and make money within the metaverse. What is it that you're going to be actually doing in there? What are the contracts that you're arranging to understand what are the different flows and the different taxation events that can occur there? Are you going to be selling goods? Are you going to be selling services? Is it a license? Those have different tax impacts.
What questions should I be asking as a tax professional of, say, the product team or the engineering team to start to understand maybe where we're headed? What are the most important elements that would help me understand the tax implications?
How you track that, how you ultimately understand who your customer is and track who your customers are and have the appropriate level of information.
That's extremely important. And for example, word of international indirect taxes, usually the VAT or the GST appears if you have an individual at the end. And you have to know if is that a business I'm selling to, is that an individual, right? So then the taxation either appears or not. It's your system or your ability, your platform has to be able to pick that up. Yeah. And also to pick
or
that.
Or if it's an avatar you're selling to, I guess.
Exactly. There is a concept of direct to, it was direct to consumer, now it's direct to avatar. But there's, to some extent, tax authorities will be still seeing that real world somewhere behind and trying to tie that back to the physical person who owns either the crypto wallet or is sitting and buying the services somewhere, right?
Well, how do you know where they are in the metaverse, and how are you tracking that, especially when it's a little bit different than what it historically has been?
But it sounds like we don't have a lot of answers from countries around the world or regulating bodies relative to what this will look like.
I think they're starting to understand.
They're starting
to think about it.
Historically, perhaps when a company was contemplating a new business model, they might not have gone to tax first. But actually sounds like perhaps this is the time for that, given the implications that we've been discussing here in terms of even the engineering that needs to support their ability to sort of comply with tax regulation. As a tax professional, how should they be engaged at this early in the process when you're thinking about sort of new product introduction?
Well, I think there's costs associated with that. Coming up with those systems and designing those tracking mechanisms is not necessarily inexpensive in itself.
Correct.
And if you don't have tax involved in those and you're trying to fix that on the back end, it's just probably not going to work out.
Yeah.
And you have talked a lot about location and the importance of identity and location, geographical location in terms of tax implications. I mean, from an engineering perspective, that maybe is no small feat, and the technology associated with being able to track an individual from a geographical perspective within the minute that the transaction occurs or the minute that they're enjoying a service, that requires significant engineering support, right? That they need to be thinking about in terms of costs, but also just in general in terms of creating infrastructure that would support that.
Absolutely. But this is also a business opportunity. So, the providers, platforms, marketplaces who will have that ability to track and pick up on those items could be, the first movers advantage using the first mover advantage in the metaverse. The pandemic obviously created this gigantic experiment of moving people from offices to their home. And there is some value that we have all achieved through that. But I think there is a recognition that connection with one another at work is really important. And could the metaverse help to solve some of the challenges that we have today from a hybrid work perspective? Let's talk a little bit about how companies are thinking about the future of work and then associated perhaps tax implications for using that type of technology.
Well, so I mean, you're talking about any industry potentially could be training its individuals through the metaverse, and that might include content that needs to be produced and whether that content could qualify for a tax credit and where you produce it and how you distribute it and where you distribute it could have tax implications as well. So.
And just as well where your people are they could be sitting anywhere on the planet. The metaverse could enable you to access the workforce that you normally would not have access to. This is like definitely a great opportunity. Some challenges, tax challenges, of course, associated, because then you're going to have to figure out like where those people are, how exactly tax their income, or either creating any presence for your company, corporate income tax wise or VAT wise. That's going to be the question asked. But definitely the opportunity for training, onboarding, and immersive experiences as a workforce is immense.
Any other thoughts relative to that in terms of just broader implications for other industries leveraging the metaverse technology?
In terms of, there's a couple of things there. So for example, trainings and a lot of the taxation issues stemming from what is digital service taxation. Digital service understood as services without the human interference, right? But if you have an actual human fixing a machine somewhere just through the use of metaverse, it could be following, a different rule set than your classic digital service taxation. Maybe you're going to have to figure out exactly where is that taking place, and is that again B2B or a B2C relationship? So another degree of complexity kicks in for sure.
So Tyler and Barbara, thanks for joining me today. It's been a really enlightening conversation. As a non-tax professional, I feel like there is a lot for companies to be considering in this, in when they're contemplating entering the metaverse, which frankly, as we said, is probably, something that all companies need to be looking at. But any parting thoughts for our viewers today?
For sure. Whether you're a company that wants to start existing in the metaverse and sell your goods or services in the metaverse, or potentially a provider, an operator in the metaverse, I think you're safe to consider that there will be tax consequences regarding your operations in metaverse.
And I think it's just important for whether you're a tax professional or a non-tax professional to appreciate that there are going to be tax consequences that are significant, and to be thinking about that as you go forward, and not to forget about it and let tax be that last piece that holds you up.